Why don't we just start talking a little bit and then we'll roll into it. I feel like that's the best. Like, that's what Rogan does. They talk. They have, like, conversations leading up to the podcast.
You can tell, too.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they'll just go, all right, we're rolling. We were just talking about said topic. Rogan is, like, kind of a genius when it comes to podcasting. Chris Williamson was also talking about how he noticed that Rogan doesn't ask a lot of questions like most podcast hosts do. They'll ask a question, the guest will answer, and then they'll ask another question to the guest is to answer. This guy's just flying down.
Literally, he's going like 25.
So what Rogan does is, why Rogan feels like just two friends having a conversation is because Rogan just makes statements. So someone will talk about something for a long time, and then Rogan will just make a statement. Like, oh yeah, a similar thing happens in the MMA community. Rogan will just speak from his own experience, give a statement, and then that helps the conversation flow. Yeah, like a conversation would when you're just talking with friends. Versus like, oh, that's really interesting. So, next question. You know what I mean? Because that just chops up the conversation. With Rogan,
I mean, Lex Friedman's more like he's interviewing people versus talking to them. Rogan genuinely just talks.
Rogan genuinely just has conversations.
He's only asking questions when he's trying to, like, he wants answers about something he doesn't know.
And the conversation will go to crazy places. Like that podcast with Eric Weinstein that I was talking about. They started by talking about, like, pufferfish biology or something like that. And then they got on to some other crazy subject. I can't even remember the topics, but they were just, like, completely different topics that had nothing to do with each other, and it was just wild conversations. And then at a certain point in the podcast, they acknowledged. They were like, how did we just go from talking about that to that? Like, it was just funny, the way that the conversation went. And that's kind of what's so cool about Rogan, is the conversations just go to wild places.
That's the one, I don't know if you guys ever watched the one I sent you where he was interviewing or having a conversation with Andrew Schultz and Charlemagne, but it's an extremely funny episode because it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and like they just go on like the most insane tangent from start to finish. Like it never stops moving to different topics. Yeah. And both of them are really funny, so that's a really funny episode.
All right, let's just start the episode.
Let's commence.
All right. Frasetto Brothers podcast. We've got lawnmowers in the background giving us some incredible noise.
Every time we move in our chairs, it's gonna sound like we're opening a door. So
yeah, we need to be cognizant of not doing that. But I want to start out by talking about what we were just talking about, which is like, I notice this a lot because I do videography for work. So people completely change when they know that a camera's rolling. And this happens all the time when you interview people. You'll be interviewing someone, they talk in a certain way, and then as soon as you stop rolling, like a natural conversation breaks out. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of sad. You're like, I wish we could get this on camera. And so what you'll do is you'll actually turn the camera back on. You'll be like, we need to get this conversation. And then as soon as you turn the camera back on, people snap into a different mode and start talking like a camera's on. Mm-hmm. It's so weird, that effect. And like, you can't consciously turn that off. When the camera's on, you act different, regardless of the fact that you know that you're acting different. It's such a strange effect.
Yeah, for a lot of people that are inexperienced with being on camera, I feel like when the camera turns on, they have the same response as if they're dealing with like a cashier at a restaurant or a store, where like your voice changes, you start acting like very polite and talking in a way that you normally wouldn't in basic conversation. That's like a response that a lot of people have. It is interesting
and politically correct.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the effect really wears off with everyone, because you look at these politicians and these actors and they're clearly still acting different than they would if the camera wasn't on. But there does seem to be certain individuals like Trump and Joe Rogan both come to mind that do seem to be able to stay natural even if the camera's rolling. It's really strange. Like, some people are capable of breaking out of it, some people aren't.
Well, with comedians, and Trump is one to some degree, their personality just translates well to being on camera. They're funny. Like, when you're on camera, you don't want to be boring, and they're not inherently boring, so they can still be themselves and still be interesting. When you're a politician, like, you don't you're not an interesting person. You have to just talk about these topics that you talk about all the time. So it's hard for them to be real at all, like really in any capacity.
Yeah, that's very true. I feel like, I don't know, Trump's special though, because he's able to stay real in formats that almost nobody stays real. Like televised interviews, panels, things like that. Joe Rogan's able to stay real in a podcast setting, which I think is the easiest setting to stay real in, because you're just having a conversation with someone else. Mm-hmm. And if you're able to consciously forget that you're on camera, you might be able to just come off as completely natural. And I think when people go on like Joe Rogan, they become natural because of the way that he is. Like his energy brings them with him. But yeah, it's really interesting psychological dynamic, I think. I think it's good to know about it too, because when you're watching things online, you have to be able to know that people are acting differently than they would be off camera. Like very drastically differently. Mm-hmm. Not stating what their opinions actually are, not saying what they believe to be true. Even when you're just hanging out with friends or in a social setting, you're putting on a mask. I mean, psychologists have known this forever, that people put on a mask when they're in public because reputation is essential when you're in your tribe. Because if you have opinions that go against your tribe, that's like an actual threat to your survival. So there's psychological mechanisms that kind of lean you in the direction of complying with the ideas of the people around you. And then this ties into like agreeableness, and which is a psychological trait. It's one of the big 5 personality, I don't know how they word it, personality markers. I got that wrong, but the big 5, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and there's 2 others. But yeah, I think that's fascinating. And then there's all sorts of biological mechanisms that play into that as well. But that opens a whole different can of worms. I don't know if we want to go down that path.
That's a path that only you have treaded. I haven't looked into any of that stuff.
I feel like these paths are better explored in articles, which I've done. So I don't really want to dive into it too much. But it is fascinating how people change their behavior drastically in different circumstances. And when you point a camera at someone, that's a surefire way to change someone's behavior. But one of the topics we did want to talk about here is propaganda, which I've been kind of looking into a lot recently. I was reading Edward Bernays' book on propaganda. He's known as the father of propaganda. He was related to Sigmund Freud, and he really dove into the psychology of propaganda, and he talks a lot about PR in his book, about public relations, so how companies kind of interact with society at large and interact with the public. And then obviously there's PR firms, and there's entire branches of companies now dedicated towards how are we going to interact with the public when it comes to cultural ideas, how are we going, what stance are we going to take on certain issues, and it's all kind of designed to, I don't want to say it's just designed to make as much profit as possible, because there's so many other factors at play.
I mean, part of it's designed to mitigate risk of like controversy. They're just trying to, well, that's what's so interesting about the time we're in now. It's starting to not be that way, where companies are genuinely taking stances on political issues that are divisive, and it's very weird that they're willing to do that and not just stay neutral. But in the past, it was usually an effort to just stay neutral on topics and try and remain professional, which it's changing.
Well, like we were diving into the other day, BlackRock, which is a massive financial investing conglomerate, is able to influence the companies that they're invested in to take certain stances on certain issues that BlackRock has decided it wants to take. So you can't just say that a company's main goal is to take the stances that make them as much profit, because they're actually being influenced by entities that are above them that have different interests than that company itself. And then we were talking about how that ties into what the hell is going on with Hollywood. Hollywood is collapsing in real time. They're not producing good movies. I mean, it's pretty obvious and it's pretty clear. And part of that is because they're being influenced by entities that don't really necessarily care about their financial success. Because the entity above them has other interests and owns all sorts of other different companies that they can hedge their losses against particular industries with other industries like the tech industry. Yeah. So when you start digging into that, it gets really interesting and you start going down some crazy rabbit holes that you're really not, it doesn't seem like you're supposed to really go down these rabbit holes.
No. And I still struggle to wrap my head around it. Even if you're so diversified that like you don't need to worry about a singular company failing if you're something like BlackRock, I still don't get why you would allow that to happen. I don't know why your motivation would be to have every company you're heavily involving yourself in be a success, other than, like you've said, genuinely just wanting to spread a message. But I just struggle to like project that mindset into my own mind, that people genuinely want to control a message so bad that they're willing to like take a loss doing so.
What I would say to that is individuals have a strong drive to spread their ideological, religious, economic ideas onto other individuals. Most people just don't have the power to do that at scale. But let's say you're a Larry Fink and you're the head of this giant financial institution that finds itself in control of all of these subsidiary companies. Why would you not want to spread your ideas across the economy, the culture? You know what I mean? Individuals want to spread their ideas, even people that have almost no power to change minds. Why would you not want to change minds at scale if you have that sort of control over that many companies?
Yeah, well, maybe I'm just being naive, but I don't have like a drive to change people's minds about certain things. I like to teach stuff, but I would want to teach stuff that would give other people success. What he's teaching and like the message he's putting out, if it's really his message and his power that he's using, isn't working. At least in Hollywood, like the companies that BlackRock, we already looked it up. The 5 major production companies all are heavily invested in by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And like, if what you're saying is true, they're just basically getting controlled by them, which they're not succeeding under that authority.
But they are succeeding in spreading the ideas that they're trying to spread.
Yeah, but like what I was saying, why would you want to spread your ideas when they're out there and failing right before your eyes? Like,
are the ideas, they might be failing in a monetary sense, but are they failing?
Yeah, maybe they're seeing results elsewhere. I guess they are.
I mean, society's becoming more feminized.
That's true.
Society's becoming more influenced by LGBTQ+. It's
one of the loudest trucks I've ever heard.
If you think about it in the sense that they're trying to spread ideas and propaganda, they don't care necessarily about how profitable these movies are.
Yeah.
And some of them are both. I mean, I think the Barbie movie was a massive financial success, and it was a massive success when it comes to propaganda.
Yeah.
Right? Can you take that off the table? I forgot that was there. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about the Barbie movie all that much, but there was a lot of feminist propaganda embedded into that movie. Whether you think spreading feminist propaganda is a good thing or not, that's the reality of that. Yeah. If you analyze that movie, there was heavy feministic propaganda embedded into that movie.
I've never seen the movie, and I'm always hesitant to like jump to that conclusion, especially considering it's a Barbie movie, and like that's about as girly as you could get. So obviously you're gonna have a feminist message. The issue I took with the movie, though, if this is really the case, was the assumptions it uses to actually deliver its narrative. Like, it just assumes that there's a patriarchy and that it's a bad thing, and then runs its plot from that point, basically.
But that's the baseline assumption of feminism, is that there's a patriarchy that is detrimental to females.
Yeah.
That's in place in reality. And the idea of feminism is that there needs to be more strides towards dismantling that patriarchy, essentially.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the stance the movie takes.
There's a scene of girls smashing baby dolls. What more of a potent image other than females are done dealing with children?
Yeah.
They're escaping the chains of child rearing.
Yeah, I didn't even see that scene, but that's not very promising hearing that. That is a direct message. That's a statement, basically.
It's a symbolic, potent message. The movie was targeted towards moms and young girls. These things they're not coincidences. But
then you think, like, well, I'm sure, like, toy sales for Barbie shot up, but what is Barbie then? Barbie's just, like, some model.
Well, that's the beauty of what these people are doing, is they're hijacking cultural phenomenons, successful products, successful IP of the past, and they're hijacking it to inject their propaganda into the audiences that still have an emotional connection to that.
That has really been the trend recently. That's happening basically across the board with most movies coming out right now. Most of them are old IPs being hijacked, recasts, redos, remakes, remasters. It's all like this slop. So I guess that's what Larry Fink is pushing. It's very interesting, though, to me. Like, the only way to support doing that would be if you truly want your message out there, because it's not going to drive profit for a long time until you fully brainwash everyone into liking that stuff, which I still can't see a reality where the stuff they're pushing out is ever going to be enjoyable. I think what you were saying the other day is actually a better prediction, that maybe his goal is to just have Hollywood die. Like, he doesn't need there to be a creative outlet like that, because all that does is allow people to spread ideas that he might not want out there. So once Hollywood withers away, he has full control, basically.
I wouldn't say that they want Hollywood to die, but they're going to use Hollywood to spread their propaganda, potentially at a financial loss. And they have plenty of other ways of spreading propaganda, so if Hollywood takes a hit, that's not, I'm sure they think about it and have these discussions. Hollywood's struggling with these ideas that we're pushing. Do we want to keep pushing them at the expense of Hollywood? We're massively successful with the tech industries that we're invested in. Mm-hmm. If they're not losing money as a whole, it's fine if some industries take a hit. Creative industries always take a hit when you have some sort of central planner trying to spread propaganda. I mean, this is why, like, we don't talk about movies that were made in communist era Soviet Union, and freaking China sucks at making movies because they don't want the free spread of ideas.
Yeah.
Central planning is like the enemy of creativity because you're not allowed to be creative. I was listening to Jordan Peterson speak about this, and he was talking about how they were studying, and there's zero correlation between success in the university system and creativity. There's a correlation between IQ and success. There's a correlation between discipline and hard work and success, but there's zero correlation between creativity and success in the university system. And he was basically saying the reason that is because how can you reward creativity in an organization? Creativity involves going against the rules and the ideas that the organization is trying to purport.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in Hollywood. Like, if you're trying to purport these ideological ideas, there's no room for creativity because creativity would mean breaking those ideological rules. That's why comedians are creative, because they try to break all sorts of societal rules and point out all sorts of contradictions in society. That's creative. And that's just simply not allowed when you... BlackRock posts a... what was it called? Do you remember
proxy guidelines?
Proxy guidelines for the ideas that it wants to push across all of its companies that's invested in. How the hell are you supposed to be creative under that?
Yeah, your board of directors is following a rule book on what to allow into the company and what for the company to create. So yeah,
it's the same reason why innovation doesn't occur under communism, because you're not allowed to break the rules of the communist regime, central planning authority. If you do break the rules, you're punished, thrown in prison, killed. So everybody's too scared to innovate. And innovation is essentially an act of engineering. It's essentially an act of creativity in engineering and technological advancement. So it's like there's no room for creativity, innovation, new ideas under these central planners that have control over massive portions of the economy, essentially.
Something that would be so incredible to see would just be like a recording of a director meeting. Like the board of directors is in their office just talking about this stuff. I would love to know what it looks like when they're deciding on projects now. It has to be the most depressing room in history. They probably, I can't even imagine it, because the stuff they're putting out, it's just soulless.
It's Orwellian, but think about it. Everybody watches Game of Thrones. There's a group of the ruling class in a room together all the time in Game of Thrones, discussing how they want to deal with certain issues, wars, how they're gonna trick the public, trick the civilization into believing certain things. These conversations have been going on for all of human history. It's nothing new. When you have central planners, they get together in rooms, they look at analytics, they look at public sentiment, they have these PR people that are telling them about them, they have polling, they have all of these statistics, and then they're trying to make decisions on how they're going to maintain control over society and how they're going to get more control over society. It's as simple as that. It's been going on for all of human time. And I imagine that these conversations look very similar to the way they did in the past, just with modern technologies implemented into it.
In the past, it was like the rulers were making these decisions. Now that role has been relegated to like corporations, and it's very Orwellian, I guess you could say, because the power is coming out of the hands of the people in pretty much every capacity. It's like,
bro, think about it. No one's gonna listen to this podcast, but if this podcast were to blow up and all of a sudden it has millions of views, the chances are, with the topics that we're talking about right now, someone in a boardroom at YouTube would be discussing this podcast, looking at it and going, what are the ideas that they discuss in this podcast? How many comments does it have? How many people are sharing this podcast? Do we want these ideas getting out? Maybe we don't want these ideas getting out. We're going to hit them with a violation of the rules.
Yeah.
We're going to flag the video.
Yeah.
They literally have a warning system. That's what the flagging system is. It's a warning system. You talked about something you weren't supposed to talk about in a way you weren't supposed to talk about it. If you keep doing this, we're going to demonetize you. If you still keep doing it, then further discussion.
3 strikes and then they delete your channel and you lose all your videos and everything.
You go down the rabbit hole enough and they hit you with cancellation. And then after they hit you with a cancellation and you still don't shut up, they hit you with lawfare.
They'll reach out to their buddies. You'll get banned off of every platform. Like they did with Tate. They took them out of everything.
We're just regurgitating stuff that Andrew Tate has said a million times.
Yeah.
But that's just clearly how it works. They just threw Pavel Durov in prison for violating some sort of... There's governments out there that have decided that Telegram is not censoring their information enough. They're not removing enough criminal activity. These are their claims. And so they throw the CEO of Telegram in jail. Why are they not coming after the company itself with lawsuits? Why are they throwing the CEO in prison? It's to send a message to all the other CEOs. If you step out of line and you allow too much free speech, we're going to come for you. We're not going to come for your company. We're going to come for you. That's a fear tactic.
Yeah.
It's a fear tactic. It's clearly a fear tactic. How are you going to hold a CEO responsible for the way that this massive technology company handles its content moderation.
Same way they come after Musk. I mean, like, Twitter is this massive social media platform that has, I'm sure, a lot of intricacies that he can't control at his own will. But they're constantly slandering him and coming after him and blaming him for everything. So it's just how they handle it.
And they come after individuals.
Yeah, that's...
Because they want it to be, they want to scare the leaders. That's like one of the things that Edward Bernays talks about a lot in the book Propaganda. He talks about how when you're implementing propaganda, you want to control figures. You don't necessarily need to control entities as much as you need to control figures, because people listen to figures. And if you scare figures and they're in charge of entities, that's all you need. If you get figures to say certain things and influence public opinion, you don't necessarily need full control over companies and entities. You need control over individuals to a great degree. So it's kind of fascinating if you think about those dynamics. Does it make sense to go after an individual, or does it make sense to go after the company that the individual is in charge of?
Well, yeah,
With someone like Elon Musk or Pavel Durov, these people are tweeting. They're on X posting. They're giving their ideas straight to the public. So the only way to shut the people up is say that their company violated something, come after them with lawfare, scare the individual as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not the only way, but it's a strategy that you can use. It's like you're aiming a bullet right at the heart of the problem. You're not trying to just shoot a machine gun at their company. You're trying to one bullet sniper shot right to the leader. Yeah. It's like you can cut through everything else just by scaring the leader, because Pavel Durov, they threw him in prison. Telegram's already changing their content moderation policy. So it worked. You scare the leader, and you get policy change in the organization.
Yeah, they're like they operate under the guise that there's criminal activity on these platforms. Like, that's why they take action. But like you said, they just take legal action. So that calls into question what the criminal activity is, and if they even have in their laws the ability to stop it from occurring on the platform. They probably don't. So they just go after these leaders. But then there's people online that hear that, oh, there was criminal activity on Telegram, that's why they did it, and that's the reason, that's all they need to hear. And they accept it. And it is scary that
try to get closer to your mic, like even if you have to slouch. But it's like, when you have a sovereign company, right? The leader is essentially the spearhead of the entire company.
He's the face of the company.
If you have a sovereign nation, the leader of that nation is the spearhead. If you have a puppet organization, if you have an organization with a puppet leader who's really just falls under some other, it's like a proxy company, that's really easy to control. But when you have a company like Telegram, where Pavel Durov is a sovereign leader of this company, the only way you can really attack that company is if you come after Pavel directly. Like, Elon Musk seems to be a sovereign leader of all of these different companies that he has. So the only way to come after that is to attack Elon Musk directly. If you have a company like Disney, they just put like puppet leaders in there, and then they just do whatever they say because they're owned by these financial conglomerates that are above them. It works the same way on a global scale with countries. The United States is able to control so many democracies around the world because the CIA can just set up coups and just put puppet leaders because we have such power. We could just do these economic IMF monetary operations where we just go to these countries and
they're just economic takeovers. We basically just infuse our own cash into their economy to where they're reliant on it.
But if you want to influence the leadership of a country like the United States, you need to come after the presidential candidates almost directly. The Democratic Party seems to be controlled by something else, and they put these puppet leaders in. And I think the Republican the Republican Party largely was up until Trump was elected president. Trump appears to be a sovereign individual, and they seem to be trying to attack him directly through lawfare, and they just tried to shoot him. So I think that kind of shows you how much of a sovereign individual he is. The only way they can hurt his influence,
or as some people, conspiracy theorists like to believe, how much of a sovereign leader they want you to think he is. Because he didn't die, the shots didn't hit him, and it was quite a weird scenario that the guy even got in position to shoot at him. So there's a
kind of weird.
Yeah, beyond weird. Blatant.
Yeah, there's definitely an interesting dynamic that goes on there, though. The differences in which you attack sovereign individuals and entities that don't have a sovereign leader at the top, the attack vectors that you can use are very different. Very different.
Well, it goes from slander to legal action. Like, you can't come after an entity with, oh, they do this, they're really mean. Not that many people can. I mean, conservatives especially, if like a government tries to go after like an energy company, some oil company, and they did this, they polluted this place, a lot of people write that off. They're not like they can't win that battle. They haven't won that battle because those companies continue to chug along. So yeah, they do need figureheads, and unfortunately the social media companies pretty much all have them and are all vulnerable via the same type of attacks, and it just continues to happen.
Yeah, propaganda is endlessly interesting to me. I think more people should study it. I mean, they would never teach it in school, obviously, because they want everybody that goes through the public school system to be susceptible to propaganda. But as an individual living in the current climate that we're in, I think it's extremely beneficial to study propaganda and what kind of mechanisms they attempt to use to spread propaganda, to program people to do certain things. Yeah, I think it's essential. So we can move on to the next topic.
What is that? We're about to say something.
We're going to talk about Downey Jr. being paid $100 million, allegedly, to do this next Avengers movie, which is sure to be a hot pile of garbage.
Yeah.
I was mind blown. Like, how can you justify paying a single actor $100 million for a single movie? I guess it's the same thing as sports. Like, you could pay one quarterback tens and tens of millions of dollars for a contract.
Well, and what you found out, he started to look into actors that have been paid a lot. He saw that Keanu Reeves made a similar sum from the first three Matrix movies, which that was also factoring in inflation, probably more than what Downey's being paid for the singular movie. But the reality is, the movie hasn't come out yet. I don't know what stage it's in production. It's still not coming out for 2 years. And he's already been paid the $100 million up front. Usually it's an after-the-fact thing. An actor gets a certain percentage of the box office, and that's how they amass all the wealth. But if he has that worked into the deal as well, he could be seeing much more money than just $100 million. And to me, that's just more money being taken out of your profit margin, and most likely more money being taken away from like the visual effects department or the writers. They get nothing now, and it's really starting to show on screen. So I don't get the motivation there, other than just hoping that he's just this massive figure that can bring back the crowds of old.
But it doesn't feel like there's any build up to this movie. Maybe the younger generations are like
still invested. I don't think so. I don't think their shows are doing that well. I don't get it. I don't know why they wouldn't try and really slow down and maybe just make like a movie that's much more of like a standalone type of thing, and just see how it resonates. Like, that's the one thing I like that DC's doing. Even though they're trying to reboot their trash universe, they're making like the Batman movies and stuff like that still. Like, I think Batman 2 is coming out at some point, and those are just like these separate entities, and I think Marvel should be exploring that more, because they have good stories to tell, but not in their universe anymore. It's been completely exhausted.
Yeah, I just, having been a Marvel fan as a kid, I just can't get behind anything that they're doing right now. Maybe the younger generations, it's a little bit different for. I'm sure it is. but I don't know. It's just sad.
It could be just a simple case of just getting older and like losing the magic. But I find that hard to believe though, because I could still go back and watch like Iron Man or Winter Soldier or Infinity War, like some of the better movies, and they hold up. They're really good movies still.
Here's a question: do you think the younger generations, with the way that their brains are being molded by short form content and TikTok, are they even going to be able to follow a long-term, build up structure of like multiple different movies interacting across time to lead up to like Infinity War and Endgame, something like that? Like what happened with the last phase of Marvel, or their attention span is just going to be way too shot for them to follow something like that?
It happened with us too. If like you try and take a further step back, go further back in time, I'm sure like 50-year-olds that are witnessing what we witnessed, the initial 10-year Marvel kind of build up, that was probably way too complex for them, and just like, well, I guess that's like the reverse effect. We got to like a point where we could understand that stuff, and now you think it's getting so severe that the attention span is dropping below that.
Try to get closer to your microphone.
I'm talking pretty loud. I think they can hear me.
All right, keep going.
You just broke my train of thought, but like, yeah, the attention spans are kind of getting fried now, and I get what you're saying, but I think TikTok is actually a great mechanism to keep track of all that stuff, because the way the multiverse is working now, you almost need like tons of fans making all these videos explaining all of it in short form content, just so people can follow what's going on.
You can't explain something in short form content. I don't think you can actually explain something of any value in like 30 seconds.
In a minute?
Or a minute, yeah.
I think you could explain how a movie ties into the overall narrative in a minute. Because basically all you have to do, if you just try and do it with like the Marvel movies that came out that were all building toward Infinity War, you're basically just analyzing the end credit scene. You just do a quick explanation. At the end of Thor 2, The Dark World, this is the Aether, which ultimately turned into the Reality Stone. That's like a 60-second video. Now someone knows that movie set up where they're going to get that stone from. Like that's all it is.
I don't know. I just question whether or not anybody's capable of keeping up with all this multiverse stuff.
Maybe Marvel's like Phase 7 will just be 60-second movies. Like it'll just be like these super short stories.
This is something I want to talk about. Physics is really struggling right now to come up with a unifying theory. They're starting to like battle amongst themselves, like string theory people against the people that think string theory is a waste of time. And then you got these multi-universe theory people. It's like, I think that to make a coherent plot structure for long-term movies, especially for Marvel, you need like, the theory of physics has to be in place. Like, the idea of multiverse is a physics idea. And it seems to be like really problematic for creative minds to come together and try to use that theory of the multiverse to create coherent movies across time.
Yeah, having a leading physics theory would basically be like a framework for the writers, because right now like the furthest their minds can go is just having like 20 versions of a person, and like one's like an alligator. Like that's their idea of like a multiverse.
You know what's also really interesting is Endgame, which was the final movie of the past era. The series ended with them literally giving a physics explanation of how time travel can work with this multiverse, with this theory of the multiverse. Mm-hmm. So Endgame was the introduction of the multiverse. They seemingly pulled it off in that movie in a way that made sense.
Theirs was less the multiverse and more like an alternate take on time travel, where like you create a new reality when you time travel.
Yeah, it was how you can travel with the multiverse. But then the events in that movie kicked off this whole multiverse next era of Marvel that is just incoherent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do not like the direction Marvel's going at all. I don't think they're capable of writing. That's the thing. You are only as smart, or your characters and your world is only as smart as you are as the writer. So they're way in over their heads with having no actual theories to base their thoughts on. They don't have any like real backing. It's just their own ideas, and their own ideas are just clearly not sensible.
Pause for a second here.
Yet another distraction. can adjust my chair, thank God. My cheeks are on fire.
Yeah, well, multiverse is indeed madness, as that the title of the one movie.
The Doctor Strange movie revealed.
It's actual chaos. It's like, it can't not be chaotic, because think about it. You're a creative, and you're sitting down, and multiverse literally implies that there's infinite universes other than the one that's occurring through time. So each moment, all of these universes are shooting off in different directions. Infinite possibilities. How is a creative supposed to create something incredible, a coherent plot structure, when there's literally infinite possibilities? It's almost like the problem that modern art runs into. Modern art is freaking chaos. It could literally be anything. There's infinite possibilities. You look at this old, beautiful art, and it's like, all right, there was a structure to it. It had to be in a particular style. It had to be realistic to reality.
Sculptures.
Impressionists got a little bit more. There was a lot more wiggle room with Impressionism. But with Impressionist art, it still had to represent reality in some way.
Yeah, you're working on like a canvas a lot of the time. That keeps things restricted. Now it's like, oh, this lawn chair.
Well, you're still working on it. Yeah, true. Yeah, like contemporary art, you don't even have to be on a canvas anymore. It could just be like a lawn chair. Like what we saw in that art museum.
And one of the things was a lawn chair that was on display.
So it can literally be anything. Anything you want. It produces terrible art. Impressionism art had to be based on, you had to be able to look at it and go, oh, that represents something real, even though it's kind of abstracted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like across so many different areas: physics, art, movies, gender identity.
Yeah,
we're running into chaos, essentially. Yeah. So what do you do once you're in chaos across so many different realms of human endeavor? How do you restore order?
By making sense of it. But what a lot of people would argue is that we don't have the ability to make sense of some of these things. Like the whole gender ideology stuff, to a lot of people, does and will never make sense. Like there's no way to make sense of it. So you're basically gonna have to leave people behind in order to like make this stuff a reality. Because right now it just doesn't line up with anything that's occurred in the hundreds of thousands of years that life has been occurring here, and 100,000 years we've been here. Like it just, none of the history backs what we're going into.
I feel like that's the problem of the modern world. How do you?
We just don't have reference for where we're going.
Well, you never do. But things seem to be disorderly at a level that we just have not seen in past times.
You do to some degree. Like everyone's working from experience, even if they're going to something that or making something that hasn't existed before. If you're creating a crossbow, you're using the same fundamentals that the bow uses. Like you're still using those same ideas, but now it's like even that Terrence Howard guy that was just on Rogan. He's trying to like create a whole new way of thinking, basically. Like he's trying to leave the old framework. Like that is the type of thing that I feel like needs to happen to make sense of the stuff we're trying to make sense of. So if you keep thinking in binary and with our mathematics and everything, I don't know how you could explain some of the stuff we're trying to explain. So maybe he's onto something.
But if you do what Terrence Howard did, then you're, like Jordan Peterson would say, then you're wandering around in the desert.
Yeah, you're in over your head. One person alone is not going to be able to reinvent thought itself. And maybe thought just doesn't need to be reinvented on. Maybe it just needs to be iterated from now until the end of time. Like we just need to keep iterating, updating, and improving.
Well, when you take a sledgehammer to religion, to gender, to physics, like eventually you just get to a point where you're like, okay, well, what do we have?
You're destroying the social and mental fabric of like the world. So you'd just be left with anarchy. Like we would go straight back to like primal tribalism. which we're kind of like slowly doing online, but we're still civil in the real world. But once that connection severs and we're just like saying LOL in real life and there's no like emotions, we're all like robots, then it's over.
Yeah, I mean, society's still functioning pretty well. I mean,
it's like you're on the internet. Maybe like you're the type of person, you're a keyboard warrior. You're raging on the internet, but then like you go to the store and you're just a person again. So like, that's still occurring at least. But I don't know how long that's gonna last with Larry Fink at the helm. He's trying to break it down all the way.
I mean, yeah, there's just certain areas where all of the tradition has been withered away. Like, once you start getting to gender fluidity and the family unit starts to break down, then you're kind of in a weird place.
Well, that's something I just saw online. It was just like a quote talking about how traditions are created to solve issues or to stabilize things a lot of the time, and then as they progress through the years, people tend to forget what their use was and then ultimately get rid of them only for the problem to come back and then to not know why that problem's there. We're kind of in that spot right now.
I saw that exact tweet, and I'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
But one of the really cool things is I think X, when you have a true free speech platform, like we both saw that.
Yeah, that
somehow.
I'm sure a ton of people saw that.
Yeah. When you have a true free speech platform, people start having conversations and discussions and solving problems, solving cultural problems. And then like the next day, a new set of problems, discussions arise, and people discuss them, come up with ideas on them. And it kind of keeps moving forward. When you censor speech, it inhibits that because you're not allowed to discuss certain problems, so the problems don't get fixed.
And people should be able to relate this to even like the simplest stuff. If you think to like school, if you were in like a group project, there's 4 of you, and you don't feel like you can share your ideas, you probably created some trash cookie cutter thing because you're not challenging each other and trying to build something better. You just create the most basic by the books project of any kind. It goes from there all the way to the very top. Like if these platforms try and censor speech, then nothing interesting will come of it. It'll just be nothing.
I mean, there's a lot of free speech platforms like podcasting, X, Telegram. They're kind of beautiful, and they're kind of what's, I think in large part, keeping society functioning, because to a greater degree than we think.
Yeah.
And then also there's new technologies that are popping up, like cryptocurrency, decentralized currency, that are just so beautiful in their structure.
Those I love. Like when it comes to X though, I don't like how up to date it keeps you on stuff that doesn't matter, like to you. Like I don't like how much we know about everything going on in the world when we can't do anything to affect it and shouldn't be thinking about it or wasting our time on it. I feel like a lot of that becomes very unproductive and almost nosy, where like you're getting involved in other people's situations more than you need to. Like that's just not what matters in life. But it's still nice that like it keeps people interconnected and you get exposed to stuff that you might have gone your whole life without hearing about, and that stuff can influence the way you look at the world.
Perhaps, but I think that's not like a specific thing to X. It's just as the world becomes more interconnected, you're gonna start hearing about stuff across the world more often.
I mean, the media was like the first one to start doing it. News went from being local to just like global, and you're hearing about stuff across the world or just across the country, and it's just there's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to bother you and waste your own time.
I feel like human consciousness, if you choose to stay connected with technology, which is almost not even really a choice anymore, it's more connected than ever, because I mean, I was in Philly the other day, and we were interviewing a bunch of people, and there was people from all over the world there, from Australia, from Brazil, from Scotland. I mean, these are all Western countries, but I think the Western world is more connected than ever. The Eastern world's a little bit different, I think.
The whole world is very, very connected. The fact that you can hop on a plane and go across the world pretty quickly is the clearest way of showing that.
Yes, but the whole Western world is connected technologically through social media platforms.
We're not seeing
the Eastern world is, you know.
But that's censorship. They don't they're not allowed to connect with us. They're kept in their own ecosystem.
Which maybe isn't a terrible thing.
Yeah, I don't know if we don't need to. That's the thing. Like, we just don't need to know what they're doing.
But the entire Western world is interconnected in a very intimate way now.
Yeah.
But that's also like scary, because if the Western world falls, the whole Western world falls.
Yeah. We're relying on it.
You know what I mean?
Sure. But I feel like Europe's more reliant on us than we are to them. Everyone's relying on China for manufacturing. I just saw another thing. You might have seen this too on X. It was is his name Tim Cook, the dude who runs Apple now?
Yes.
He was talking about why when they initially started using China for manufacturing, it kind of was because they were cheap labor. But then he was talking about how, like, nowadays they have just become so much better at engineering than we have. Like, he was saying how, like, if you tried to fill a room with, high-level engineers that are going to be able to make these phones in America, you might even not fill a single boardroom. But if you go to China, you could fill like 10 football fields with all these people.
Okay, yeah, that's really fascinating what Tim Cook was saying. I didn't even but it makes perfect sense. Countries are becoming specialized with their abilities. Taiwan knows how to make semiconductors really well. It's not just a geographical thing. Partially it is, but it's also like a human capital, which is,
that is what happened in China. We first utilized them for cheap labor, but then we were iterating on the technologies, and they just became smart and good at doing it. Like, we created an industry for them, and they adapted and have capitalized on it. And now they have basically a monopoly on the ability to make these phones, manufacture this equipment that you can't do in the West.
I mean, that's fine. You could still, but they're still great.
I don't even. Maybe I'm not saying I see an issue with that. I think it's just fascinating.
But I mean, these AI companies are amazing at finding talent in America, or maybe they're bringing people from abroad to work on these large language model projects and stuff. Countries have their own specializations. It's very interesting. It's very interesting talking about those dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Human capital is a cool concept in economics that, human capital is a very real thing. What skills do the people in your society have? What skills do the people in your company have? It's literally a form of capital. This is something I want to touch on a little bit. I don't think a lot of people can fathom the fact that certain entities, certain leaders, they don't look at human beings as like, oh, each human being is its own special person.
So Jeff, he likes this and that. No, you're a skill set.
Exactly. For certain entities and leaders, human beings are simply numbers or capital in the economic sense for a business, or in a war sense, you're literally just numbers. Mm-hmm. Like a general is looking, we have this many human beings in our army, in our force that we can send here, and they have this many human beings. Can we win that battle with this many human beings against that many human beings? Mm-hmm. There's certain senses where human beings can be looked at as literally just numbers on a screen. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I don't think a lot of people keep that in mind.
It just shows, it illustrates how important it is to actually hone a skill set and have something you can offer. Because if you don't,
you're just a number.
You're going to be perpetually stuck doing minimum wage work that requires no skill set.
And then you're just a number for McDonald's.
Yeah, you're just one of the many employees that they have.
At one of the many franchises that they have. And that all ties back into propaganda and war and everything we've been talking about. So I'm thinking we could probably wrap it up. Probably tie everything back together. We touched on a couple different topics. We actually kept it pretty coherent.
I think everything stayed. I think the only jump we made was going from what we were talking about to RDJ. That was a big leap. Even though they're connected, it's just we went from talking in macro scale to just about one person getting a lot of money. But
Robert Downey Jr.
It ended up relating.
It just randomly got thrown in there. Robert Downey Jr. making $100 million for a movie.
I mean, that actually lines up with how it occurred in the real world too. Things were happening at Marvel, and then all of a sudden he randomly was just brought back for $100 million. So That was symbolic.
I just wonder what that would do to you psychologically. Like knowing that you're being paid that much money to act in a movie.
If it is up front, I'd love to know how that deal's structured.
Talk about a way to develop a God complex. And then he comes out.
That's also just his like eccentric personality. I think RDJ, he had some struggles early on in his life. I think he got humbled early on in his life. I don't know if he's going to develop a God complex just from being offered a lot of money. He knows how important he was to the fans. He played a really good character for a long period of time. I hope he stays humble, but I really don't care.
I don't know anything about him, but I just think it's wild to be paid that much to act in a movie. It's got to be like weird psychologically.
It's certainly got to be a lot of pressure. It's the same thing these athletes have to deal with now, where they're getting paid $150 million for like a couple-year contract, and they have to deliver. And if they don't, they get absolutely slandered by the public, because rightfully so. They're getting paid ridiculous sums of money, so you got to perform.
Yeah, I mean they're getting paid. What's the average salary in the U.S.? Like it's like I want to say it's like $40,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah, the median salary might be like $30K. It might be lower than that. So
you're better at math than me. You're getting paid $100 million for one movie. How many yearly salaries is that?
330 or something. Was it 30? I don't know if I did that right.
Hold on. I'm pulling out a calculator.
It's obviously going to be some. It's 33 plus some zeros.
30. What? 100 million divided by 30,000. 3,333.
So it's 3,300. It's not 330. That's yeah.
So for one movie, you're getting paid more than 3,000 people's yearly salary.
And if like you get more realistic, let's say everyone was making $100,000, you're making 1,000 of that, and you are just one person. You could be hiring. If you halved your salary, you're still making $50 million. That's what 500 more people that could be on this project making a great salary. Like that's how much you're taking from the rest of this production. It's just, I would feel guilty. But I guess for him, if they want him back, they got to pay. I'm sure he doesn't really want to be back.
Well, think about it. There's a trade-off there. It's like, I don't know how true this is, but I always heard that Tom Brady was willing to take a lower salary so that the Patriots could be more successful. Mm-hmm. And because of that, in part because of that, if that's true, that he won all of those Super Bowls with the Patriots.
Yeah, he was less successful during his time there just because
or not less successful, but he made less money.
He made less money, but then that contributed to being more successful in the sport and probably more successful after.
So as an actor, do you care more about money? How much money you're making? Do you want to maximize that, or do you want to maximize success of the project that you're involved in?
And I think that makes it very clear how RDJ feels here. He's maximizing money because he doesn't believe in the franchise anymore, and I wouldn't either.
Unless he doesn't have a say in it, unless they're like, no, you have to take this money.
I don't know who would be saying that. I mean, only he needs to think that. He's seeing a ton of money be offered to him, and that's the amount he needed to come back, and he accepted it.
At the same time, if they know the movie's not going to be that good because of the state of Marvel, it makes perfect sense to pay this famous actor $100 million to guarantee the success of the movie, because the movie's not going to be that good, plot-wise, structure-wise.
What's happening is they're using their same format. Like Disney has been adapting a lot of stuff, taking old properties. They've run out of properties. Now they're getting old actors. Like
the actors are the properties.
They still work. Tony Stark was like, and Robert Downey Jr., he's like the face of Marvel, so you're just bringing back...
They're harvesting actors and IP, old IP. Yeah.
God forbid it just be like an original script with a new cast, someone who actually makes sense as Doctor Doom. But they just can't afford to do that, I guess, which I still do not understand. Why they can't afford to do that. If they're paying him $100 million, that's the budget of a movie. Like Deadpool, I think costed $60 million or $80 million, the first Deadpool movie, or maybe even 40. It was a cheap movie. You could make that movie twice with just not paying Robert Downey Jr.
And I love Robert Downey Jr., but he's not good enough to carry an entire...
It's all Marvel's fault.
No. He's not good enough to carry an entire movie by himself.
No, not as Doctor Doom. That's for damn sure. That's not his character. It doesn't make sense.
Or any movie, really. He's never done it before. that I know of that carried an entire movie by himself. I think some actors are actually capable of doing that.
I mean, he had the 3 Iron Man movies, which were all a success, and Iron Man 1, it was largely just his performance that shined through.
True.
I think Jeff Bridges was the villain. He was good. And then you had that guy that he was with in the cave. That guy was like not in the movie for a long period of time though. But yeah, it was really just Tony Stark in that sense carrying that movie, and he did a great job in that one.
He was such a good Iron Man. The beauty about this podcast, since nobody's gonna listen, we can trash anybody we want. Like when you get big enough as a podcast, when you discuss a famous person, you have to be like, oh, you know, I don't have anything against the guy. I don't know him. Because they know they might run into him one day.
Yeah. They'll be interviewing him in a few months. They probably know that. And
yeah, any big podcast is going to be having RDJ on in lead up to the...
He's going to be going on the circuit for sure. So you have to...
Oh, that's why Russell Crowe was just on Rogan. It's because the Gladiator. I didn't even think about that.
He's not in the Gladiator though, but I guess he's still coming up.
I'm sure they talked about it in the podcast.
Yeah, well, obviously.
They probably sent him out there like, go talk about Gladiator.
All right, well, I would like to wrap up because the flies are out right now. And
all right. I think that was successful. Thank you guys for listening to the Frasetto Brothers podcast. Or just the Frasetto Brothers. I like having the podcast at the end.
Inception moment.
The Frasetto Brothers podcast.
It'll just be us hearing us saying thank you. It's
all right.
almost like time travel.
Let's wrap.